Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today we'll be discussing various topics in the pharmaceutical industry, including market trends, how this is affecting recruitment from our side, how companies choose to position themselves dependent on the size of their business, and different attraction and retention considerations and policies, and also an opportunity for questions from the panel. So just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Marcus, working as a recruiter in the pharmaceutical industry for coming up to 3 years now. Previously focused on a candidate specialist position, but have now progressed into managing client relationships with many pharmaceutical organisations across the UK and the EU. And now, Eve, if you were able to pass on to the next slide. Now moving on to Andy to introduce himself, and if you could provide some background on your experience in the market, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. Hello, everyone. I was asked to join this particular event by Zanopa and Marcus a good few months back, and absolutely delighted to reflect on my current journey in the pharma industry, and hopefully sort of where I see myself going for the next part of my career. But I've been in pharmaceuticals for 25 years. And I actually came into the industry not by design. I'd actually been working in an advertising agency as a copywriter and art director. That was something that I was very passionate about doing as I was going through my schooling. I wanted to get more into account management and client management with the agencies, and they suggested to go and get some sales experience, which I did. And I picked up a role with 3M, who had a very small pharmaceutical sector, and ended up promoting a new respiratory brand that they brought to the market. And that was, I'd say, the sliding door moment for me in my initial part of my career, because having not thought about the pharmaceutical industry prior to that, I really didn't know what I was walking into. But initially, I was selling this inhaler into primary care and a little bit of secondary care. And then I moved into market access roles and funding positions, and then into leadership roles, certainly the last 15 years. And on that journey, I was able to get my ABPI, learn a little bit more about anatomy and physiology, and actually I realised it was something I really enjoyed. And I've never looked back. So over 25 years, I can honestly say that I've been very fortunate. I never have that horrible Sunday night feeling or dreading Monday morning. And I think if you find a career and a role that you can enjoy, the old adage of saying that you never have to work again is absolutely true. And you know, that evolution of always wanting to learn and push myself is something I've learned a little bit about who I am and how I see myself, certainly in the sort of, let's say, the second half of my career now going forward.
Brilliant. No, thanks for that, Andy. And really insightful to kind of understand some of the things that you enjoy in the space. And just to understand at the moment then, Andy, can you explain what you're currently doing in the market?
Yeah, so I've been very fortunate to be able to start my own consultancy firm earlier this year through a few changes that came about in the jobs market. And it's going well. It's 5 months in, and where I've been able to position myself is offering a different style of consultancy. My experience of working not only across branded medicines, generics, parallel imports, and licensed medicines, drawing on opportunities from not only the commercialization but from market access, and lastly being able to be involved with the whole process of starting up a business, looking at the quality aspects, all of the regulatory side of it. So all the experiences I've been able to bring to date have given me an opportunity to support many companies, not just on a commercial front. So I'm doing some work for a QA company, for example, to get them to kind of see things from a more commercial point of view. And I think that's the unique offering that I've been able to develop. And for me as well, I actually really do enjoy learning a lot more. So I never see myself as the finished article. I see myself as always wanting to find out a little bit more about something that is quite new to me. And I know over the course of this webinar, there'll be some parts that I'm challenging myself around getting an understanding of what the future is going to look like.
Brilliant. And in terms of just taking that one step further, Andy, in terms of customer base, who sort of can you support as customers, and what sort of specifics? I know you touched on a few bits there. Can you really kind of add value to here?
Yeah, so coming back to last question, my offering is quite unique from that respect. So I have been very fortunate in my career to date. I've worked at big pharma, I've worked at medium-sized pharma and small enterprises as well. And being able to be involved with big brand launches, whether that be pre-launch development and then commercialization of those brands in mass markets has been one set of opportunities I've been able to really enjoy. And then the challenges over the last 5 years, as we've seen with Brexit and the pandemic and what that's done for UK medicines. And the one thing that I've been able to really reflect on is that no matter what size of company you're representing in any way, there is a patient that's needed access to your medicines, or a healthcare professional that needs some support to get either education to that patient, for example, and understand a bit more. And big pharma is absolutely fantastic because they can create noise and volume and add real value to the campaign parts of it. And then you get a small company that can actually pick up those niche patients, those ones that maybe don't get the volume and the attraction for big pharma or medium-sized companies, but they're able to offer something that other companies can't do. And whenever you're having those discussions then with a payer or a healthcare professional or anyone in the supply chain, you're understanding that that patient is just as important if it's in a mass market type 2 diabetes therapy area, or actually an ultra niche unlicensed medicine and it's on a named patient basis. And so you do end up sort of reflecting back and thinking, well, actually, what I can offer is an insight into all those patient experiences, no matter how big the patient need actually is.
Brilliant. And I know on the first question, you went into a bit of detail, Andy, on how you stumbled into the pharma industry. Now, just taking that to now, why is it you now still choose to be in the pharmaceutical space?
Yeah, I can honestly say I've never even not wanted to be in it since I've joined it. I think there's it fits with my personality type. There's lots of people that you can engage with, whether that be to understand a little bit about the market dynamics, their thoughts. From a promotional point of view, it's always good to kind of discuss patients that would ultimately benefit from a treatment, and the constant innovation in pharmaceuticals. You're always going to have new brands coming through. There's always going to be new delivery systems. There's always going to be the patient engagement, the education part of it. And so you're always evolving, you're always pushing yourself. And I've, again, been very fortunate because I've gone from starting off with a respiratory brand. I've worked with oncology brands. I've worked in pretty much every part of the healthcare system from that respect. And you always enjoy the product you're working on. You're always working on the opportunity for someone to benefit from that, and that is the bit that just still excites me. And what's going to come through in the future? There's lots of scary and exciting stuff, as we know. But ultimately, for me, I'm a people person, and I just genuinely enjoy going out, meeting people, developing new contacts, new colleagues, feeling like I'm adding some value to someone at some stage down the line, whether that be for a healthcare professional, whether it be a payer to maximise their drug budget, ultimately getting feedback from a patient that you've supported.
Brilliant. No, thanks for that, Andy. Good to kind of understand some of the attracting factors in our market. And Eve, would you be able to go over to the next slide, please? Brilliant. So now having a look at the current market and the landscape, a bit of an open question for you, Andy. How would you describe the current pharmaceutical marketplace?
Yes, I think it would be easy to say it's challenging at the moment, and I think we probably just add a bit more context to that. There has been a significant impact on the back of the two major events in the last 5 years. Some of that was just supply chain. Some of it was actually just physically getting stock into the UK on the back of Brexit. But with all of the challenges that have been, will always be there. There's always going to be challenges, but then it's also primed for an entrepreneurial spirit and for the brave to possibly come in to that space as well. So, if I talk about some of the challenges in the last year, they're not just UK based challenges. We've seen in the press around getting hold of ADHD drugs. There's been the type 2 diabetic drugs. There's been an explosion of the Ozempic use, for example, and how patients are accessing that, and then it's impacting on patients with the therapeutic indication in type 2 diabetes. But they're not just unique to the UK, and that's where sometimes you can look outside of what's in the press and say, well, is this a global impact? Is it an EU impact? So that's a real challenge, but it also created opportunities for medicines to be brought into the UK, and that's something we'll come on to in terms of other licensing opportunities. The other challenge as well is the number of retail pharmacies on the high street is falling. They're closing at a rapid rate. Obviously, there's the funding part of that, the reimbursement, and just the general cost of inflation that's going up for the pharmacies. And so again, that's having an impact on patients in the community. It's having an impact on healthcare professionals for people to be directed to where to pick up their medication. And so that again adds to the sort of the burden and the challenge that is out there at the moment. There's also the cost of innovation. Medicines are expensive to research and develop, and as we're getting into more mAb-based treatments, the whole sort of funding cycle, let's say, means that by the time a license comes through, the cost of medicines is high, and that's a challenge then of like who's going to fund that, and are we all prepared to pick up a little bit more from our national insurance, for example. So there's a lot on the political side as well. But when I think of the heart of every challenge, there's always just someone wanting to get medication to improve their life, and that for me is still the constant that's gone on in the last 25 years. So there's always going to be challenge. There's always going to be an opportunity at the same time as well. And I'm as excited as the future as anyone else.
Brilliant. And then moving on to looking at generics and parallel imports. Now, Andy, before I go into asking a couple of questions here, for those who don't know, could you please explain what generics and PIs, parallel imports, are and what their significance is in the market?
Yeah, so there's three components actually in the market. You've got your originator brands. When they come off their patency, they move to being genericized, and that's generally where it can bring the acquisition of the drug down, because there's usually more manufacturers that license, and that's the natural life cycle of branded medicines, and that's been going on obviously for quite a long time, and it's quite interesting, to see now some of the big brands starting to move into the generics market as well. What's come about in the last sort of like 10 years is a lot of the mAb-based treatments are being called biosimilars. So again, it's a very similar process. So you'd have originator brands, and then when it goes to generics, that should become a biosimilar, as they call it. And they're widely accepted by the NHS, and obviously from a drug manufacturing point of view. And again, the idea is to drive the prices down to make medicines more affordable. And then the one that's probably not as well known in the UK is parallel imports, and I've been fortunate to be involved with that since 2020. And I had no direct experience up until that point, apart from defending against it in the UK. I've been very honest about that. But when I started working on parallel imports, I quickly learned that there was a huge educational piece that's needed around it. So if we were to go and talk about a branded medicine going to generic or biosimilar, there's the noise around that is actually very positive. People expect, okay, you're going to get the same medication, maybe a different manufacturer, but certainly more cost effective, and again with biosimilars. But actually there was a different image with parallel imports, and not only being a person who was able to bring supply into the UK, but I also was a director on the trade body, the British Association of Parallel Distributors, because I felt that the image of parallel imports needed to be corrected in some way. So what parallel imports actually are is the same originator medicine, and it's brought in from another country in the EU, unlicensed, and then either reboxed or over-labeled. So the pharmacist who was purchasing that would know that if it's coming from Sweden or Germany, let's say, that it would have English language on the box or reboxed. And so that is the only difference, really. So it's the same drug. It's not a generic, or it's not a biosimilar, and that's something a lot of people don't really understand.
Right. And how are generics and parallel imports competing in the market then against your originator or branded products, Andy?
Yeah, so generics are a huge business, as you could appreciate, through the wholesale market, but they also are able to go on to CMU tenders, for example. So they are routinely used not only in the retail sector, your high street pharmacy, where you'll get your repeat prescription on a monthly basis, but even in hospital use products as well. And they are there to drive competition. I'm talking about generics here, so they're there to drive competition where there's an opportunity to have volume being used as well. And it's a very attractive part of the healthcare business. So on the one hand, you see bespoke manufacturers bringing in as their core business as generics, but you see a lot of branded pharmaceutical companies as well, where they'll have a second company. So if they have their originator medicine and that comes off patent, it actually goes to their generics house. So there's plenty out there for examples, and that obviously retains a certain amount of sort of opportunity for them to continue with their patient base. Generics, obviously, they are there to not only drive down price, which is the most important part about it, but it means continuation for patients as well on medication. So there isn't that sort of talk about patency cliff edge. That's from a manufacturer and a license holder's perspective, but actually from a patient point of view, you should have a seamless transition into your medication. Parallel imports, they have been around for quite a number of years, and there's been significant growth in the last 4 years. That's not my take on it. There is actually independent data through IQVIA, through the European trade body, Affordable Medicines of Europe. And that has seen an increase in the UK apparel imports since 2021, both in the wholesale sector and in the hostel sector. And where I certainly think there's been a significant change is the importance of being able to approach hospitals and tender on CMU opportunities for apparel imports, which probably was less 5 years ago, but it's becoming widely more accepted now. And certainly from my experience, I've seen apparel imports being accepted, into the hostel sector very much routinely, and that's really good to see.
Brilliant. And just touching on another sort of market trend at the moment affecting the landscape is obviously VPAS. Now, Andy, are you able to describe to those attending what VPAS is and how that affects organisations?
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. So there's always been a levy, let's say, a taxation scheme within the branded pharmaceutical sector, and it's evolved over the years. PPRS schemes, which we've all been involved with, and the evolution of PPRS into VPAS is ultimately there for some clawback for the government from branded medicines, and it's never going to go away. It has to be in conjunction with the branded pharmaceutical companies. But most important thing is, it really shouldn't drive away innovation and growth. And it's never going to be popular. No one likes, giving over revenues that have been hard fought for, or a percentage of revenues. But at the same time, there has to be an opportunity for provision that where there's been a high uptake of medication, that it can go back into the sort of the government's pot. And trying to have that balance and engagement with the branded pharmaceutical companies has evolved into the latest scheme, so the VPAG scheme. It's there for a snapshot of time, and the idea is that the innovation medicines and the ones that are costing the most get the sort of first part of the levy. And as your brand cycle continues, and you will see that possibly your medicine is being superseded and not being used number one, quite rightly that percentage should go down as well. So the scheme is always in conjunction with the ABPI. So they are there acting on behalf of the companies registered in the ABPI, and from a voting point of view, try and get the best result for all the companies that are in the ABPI, obviously for the government as well. So I'm hopeful that actually what we really need, certainly from the UK perspective, is that the innovation and the revenue still coming in. We have a very good history in the UK of innovation and in medicines, and think about just COVID, for example, getting the first vaccinations as a country through the regulators, and that is something that we're all very proud of. But there's been plenty of examples of that down the line over the years, and we want to be at the top of the world stage for that. And so maybe from a manufacturing point of view, we're not seeing so much in the UK, but from a life sciences innovation, that's always going to be something that the UK is going to be world leading on. And for me, as long as that investment goes back into life sciences to generate that next stage, then I don't think it's a bad thing.
Great. And the final trend to kind of touch on at the moment, obviously, artificial intelligence is with us and developing in all of our markets. Now, have you seen this affecting your work at all, Andy? And what's your experience and thoughts here with AI?
Yeah, so AI is it's scary and it's exciting in equal opportunities. For me, on a personal level, within my work, I haven't had a huge amount of opportunity and to experience it firsthand. So the bits that I've had insight to is the recruitment process, and I've seen quite a few companies where they're moving to a more AI approach for searching for the right candidates, and that's probably got some positives. It probably has some negatives as well, because it takes away that opportunity to have the dialogue with the client and the person aspiring to join a company. And so that's kind of like one area that I have had experience with. Where I would like to kind of like get more experience is from what I've just been reading, in the journals, is the diagnostic part of it, where AI technology is able to pick up maybe a person's genes that need manipulating better than the human eye, and quicker, and get into smaller detail, and those things are very exciting, because actually if you can use AI and get the patient treated quicker, or something spotted earlier, so they are treated quicker and have better health outcomes, that's got to be nothing but a great advantage. I'd like to see how it's going to affect in terms of medicines coming out from R&D as well. Will it be able to fast track medicines a bit quicker? Will it able to support the R&D investment, where it used to be hundreds and thousands of sort of molecules to be looked at for that one molecule that was going to be treated? And will it actually kind of like get a bit more direct for manufacturers to kind of say, right, okay, that's the drug we're going to kind of like take to phase 1 trials? And if that does help, that hopefully would have an impact on the cost of medicines. So a lot of the cost on the R&D gets put back into the drug reimbursement costs. So huge amounts that I would love to get more experience with, and at the same time as well, how do we control AI so it ends up being the correct needs that we have, and obviously the scary stuff that you kind of see from a sci-fi films. But when you hear AI is also needs to be heavily regulated before it kind of gets too uncontrollable, that kind of like does scare me a little bit. So but I would like to see more of that innovation. What I do know is I went to an MHRA meeting last year, and for the MHRA, AI and technology is actually going to be one of their priorities within their whole work stream. So you'll see that if we have an opportunity to submit license for drug to market, the traditional route, that would be in one work stream for the MHRA. But actually, if we were to put something forward and say, okay, AI-driven technology has brought this to this position, they possibly might move that to higher up their list. And that was their words last year. And that's going to be interesting to observe, from the sidelines for sure.
I think just on that, it's interesting to see how already it's having an impact on day-to-day operations, but also the plans moving forward. Now, just touching in terms of on our side, we're already seeing AI used to look at mapping different market spaces, searching for candidates as well now, as well as generating bespoke messaging to each candidate based off profiles and things. And I think that's all very scary in the short period of time. And I know in terms of where do I see this going from a recruitment point of view, I think this is certainly going to support with a more transactional recruitment approach, where it is more the case of getting a CV across rather than taking the human out of the process. I know candidates are starting to be able to utilize technology to adapt their CV to a job description through artificial intelligence, and I know moving forward, my thoughts are talent acquisition and HR able to utilize different tools developed that can complete candidate sourcing themselves, where recruiters would usually kind of share across a CV and manage the whole process. But Interestingly, I think there's some things that AI won't be able to compete on from our side, and that's on the kind of value added services side, in the sense of, are they going to be able to screen for culture and how someone comes across, and actually deep diving into that experience when you speak through the CV before suggesting to put forward that candidate. And again, AI can't advise and question and challenge HR and hiring managers. And I think CVs can only tell you so much. Recruiters can provide that insight, but I think it will certainly be interesting to understand how we can integrate that together, and where that can go. But that's from my side. Now, Eve, are you able to move on to the next slide, please? Brilliant. And Andy, moving on then to small pharmaceutical organisations, it'd be great to hear from your side. How do you feel SMEs or small pharma companies differ in their positioning and strategy compared to large pharma corporations?
Yeah, thank you. As I said at the start, I've been fortunate to have experience of working at various size companies from large to small. And the one thing I could say with the small enterprises, their structure is less complex. That's no big surprise. But the advantage to that is decisions can be made quicker. That doesn't always mean it's a positive yes. Sometimes it's just an outright no, but you can get to those decisions so much better. And from my experience of being a managing director of a small medium enterprise, you feel have that connection still with the end user. So whether that be the actual buyer, whether it be hospital trust, whether it be actually a patient group that you need to kind of get some support from. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be commercial where you've still got that relevance. It can be you are sat with your people in your supply chain, or the regulatory bodies, or the quality team. And so there's so many parts of it. For me, I really enjoyed the fact that I was able to get on a Teams call to someone in the procurement team, as much as the people who were doing our outbound distribution, and anything that was from a client base in terms of purchasing. And so the larger the organization, you would be removed from that in certain steps. You'd have like whole departments, you'd probably have whole buildings, if you were at GSK, for example. And so the top person at GSK would have a totally different remit, to a person who was an SME, for example. But the relevance would still be the same. You would still need to understand that patient impact and the impact on the payer. So the relevance is still there from that point of view. Large pharma, you've probably got a lot of shareholders that are just as important as the patients, and I'm not going to say if one of them is more important than the other, but largely, sort of in small SMEs, you possibly don't have that, and if you do have shareholders, it will probably be a smaller base. So those are the kind of like the sort of the headline bits. But where the difference ultimately lies as well is I suppose the reach you can have. And if you're in big pharma, you've possibly got exceptional budgets, so you can do not just supporting the patient, but there can be awareness campaigns. There could be a lot more with the patient bodies. There could be a lot more that can be done for lobbying, for example, and that gets tougher and harder, as you come down as the different size companies. And so you have the only differentiator from that perspective is the reach that you can do, and you have to possibly choose your battles a little bit wiser at an SME, and maybe not so much when you are able to influence a lot more from a bigger pharma company point of view.
And obviously you've worked across a range of different sized organisations, Andy. Now, what would you say your preference is and why?
Yeah, I think certainly SME, small and medium-sized companies. I think I've spent the last probably 15 of my 25 years in that size company, and that is by design, and largely because I just genuinely still really enjoy being involved, at a day-to-day level. My last organisation, when I joined there, we had a small little warehouse where we were in the lockdown period having to still pack medicines and send them out the door on a truck, and I never saw myself doing that 25 years ago. But actually, I learned a lot about that organisation when I started there. I learned a lot about the customer base. I learned a lot about the challenges that we were facing and what we could do to improve. And it was a great experience for me because I'd never had that before. I'd never never had that level of experience, and no need to. But actually, it made me realise that I was really in my comfort zone. I was really enjoying that, and it meant that when I went out to speak to, not only from a commercial point of view, but actually when we were talking about the whole supply chain, when we were talking about the regulatory part of it and the quality aspects, I was able to come in with my own experience and not just how I saw it as a part of the organisation. And that you can be creative, you can solve problems in a different way that possibly you can't do with a larger company. So for me, that's always very rewarding, and where I always see myself, certainly the next part of my career.
Great. And in terms of the benefits then, Andy, I know you touched on from yourself working within an SME. What can SMEs provide to patients more, so to speak, than perhaps larger organisations?
Yeah, so I think we were talking one of the questions before about what big pharma can do, and they can reach mass market. They can change the way we view some disease therapy areas, how disease areas are managed. So an example of that, I remember when I was at Aventis before the merger with Sanofi, and we were doing a type 2 diabetic drug, which was insulin glargine, and all the insulin starts used to happen in hospital setting, and they saw an opportunity to help educate nurses in primary care for those initiations to start in the GP setting. And this was before type 2 diabetes really exploded, and so that was a great example of a big pharma company being able to invest heavily in the education part, as well as the medicine that was coming to market that was going to change patients, a lot of patients' lives. But it also kind of like took a cost impact burden on secondary care and moved it with support into primary care. Now that's something that small companies just wouldn't be able to do. But actually, where small companies are able to add real value is there's going to be patients out there that either can't get hold of a medication because it's not manufactured to a volume, and so that's where they'd have an unlicensed medicine opportunity, which is a named patient basis medicine, where they can kind of go and source that and bring it in and bring it directly in for that patient that's needed, or that group of patients that's needed. And so as you kind of take the benefits of what big pharma can do and come down, the dynamics in terms of budget might change, but the fundamentals are still there. There is a patient that's needing some medication, and there might be a point from a commercial point of view that it's no longer viable for a company to want to have a license and supply that medicine. But there will be a small SME that would say, okay, that's a good enough molecule for us to either manufacture, license, and source and sell. And actually that is perfectly fine. There's always going to be that opportunity, and so it's all relevant. Knowing that there is still always going to be a patient, if it's one patient or 1,000 patients that need a medication, the size of the company that can deliver that, that's where SMEs can add real value to the more niche and sort of lower volumes.
Those kind of unmet disease areas, so to speak. And Andy, are there any specific challenges you feel that SMEs face?
Yes, there's the first part, which is keeping the money flowing through an organisation. So medicines can be expensive to either procure or manufacture, license, and then bring into a country. And then when you sold it, you've got to have your 30-day terms or whatever you've agreed with. And so your financial kind of commitment is quite long. And so it's trying to understand that you possibly can't win all the battles that you'd like to be involved with. You have to kind of work out what is going to pay the overheads to start with, and then keep things to plan. There's also the reach. It's the world's changed, and there's a lot more of these teams-based opportunities now. Whereas traditionally, you'd be jumping in a car and going off and trying to talk to people, face to face. But these are all still loaded costs. So that's sort of a real challenge, being from first hand as an SME. There's also the how do you differentiate? When you get smaller, there's quite a lot of companies that will probably be trying to offer the same solution. So trying to add that real value of, okay, how do we stand out? What can we offer that they can't get from 30 other companies? And so having your essence, your brand awareness is the same as you'd have your marketing campaign in big pharma, but it's probably more relevant that you talk about that from an organizational point of view, because actually the medicines you're supplying might not necessarily be headline products. There'd be very few and far between for a patient that's going to turn up and needed that. So you've got to kind of find a way of what do you stand for that they possibly wouldn't get from someone else.
Great. And in terms of culture, Andy, have you found that there's been any major cultural differences between smaller to larger organisations? What's your experience been here?
Yeah, for me, there's none. I went to work for GSK. My last role was at Orapharm, and I went in with the same mindset that I wanted to learn, I wanted to grow, I wanted to add value to both the organisation, both organisations, but to myself. And both those organisations I've mentioned were very well structured for me to realise that they were meeting my ambitions as well. And every company I've been at in between, has the same approach. And I think it's something that we don't reflect on enough, actually, in terms of the life sciences sector and industry, is that you get very territorial. When you remember when I was at GSK, it was AstraZeneca were the big bad kind of company we were fighting against. And then wherever you go, you sort of concentrate on, who your competitor is, let's say, in that market space. But actually, when you look at what we do as an industry culturally, we've got regulations, not only from the government regulations in terms of the MHRA, but we've got our own industry regulations with the ABPI, for example. So that self-regulation is something that no matter which badge you're wearing and representing for, you're actually representing a whole industry trying to do something for a load of patients out there that you want to talk about, and hopefully your brand is the one that they feel has got the best clinical outcomes, it meets their patients' needs, and fortunately it's kind of funded for use. And I don't see any cultural differences wherever I've been. Every company has the same desire. They want to be doing things right, certainly making sure that they do things so the industry has got a good image around it, and ultimately as well for your kind of your salary line, making sure that you're adding some contribution back in terms of sales contribution. I hope that's kind of not too much of a disappointment as an answer.
No, it's good to understand, and I think it's really important to note the differences in terms of positioning, benefits, challenges, and sometimes yes, sometimes not in terms of the culture. And I think that can come down to the team fit management and corporate strategy as well. And just moving on to the next slide, looking into that in a bit more detail, looking at attraction and retention. Now, Andy, what do you feel is important in attracting candidates and selling the business to them?
Yeah, I mean, honesty is the biggest criteria on both sides, and I think as I've gone through my career, there's been some moves where actually that honesty piece has broken down, and you end up in a slightly different scenario than what you expected. But that's just part of life, from that respect. If I was to think of a small company, a small SME, they might not be able to compete on a package with a bigger company. And if you really want that candidate and they feel that it's right for them as well, you have to be very honest and say, okay, that's going to be difficult, but you could offer something that is maybe not financially, but good for that candidate and yourself as well. So there could be more responsibility or more diversification opportunities within the role for them to broaden quicker, for example. And that's one of the benefits, I think, when you are at a smaller company, is that you can actually kind of get people to go out their comfort zone, try things a little bit more. Possibly when you're in a bigger company, you've got your lane, you stay in it because there's 6 or 7 other people doing something that is already dedicated, and you possibly don't get a chance to kind of like outwardly grow so quickly. And again, that's where I talked about earlier on about, well, when I spoke with my previous employers about the role and on the job spec, there was no discussion about, well, on a day when we were a bit short staffed, you'll be down in the warehouse picking and packing, ready for delivery to go out that day. But actually, when it did come up at the interview stage, I was delighted by it, and I'm glad it came up to discussion because it wasn't a surprise then. But actually, if it was something that wasn't of interest to me, that could have been quite difficult. So it comes back to that honesty part, really understanding the client, and the client getting an understanding of what the role is and the business and the opportunity. And it's just getting that respect piece, in place. So, as I've been a hiring manager over the last, 15 years or so, you try and draw on your own experiences and think, okay, well, I've been sat in that chair as well. So I need to kind of have the empathy and sort of understanding of what that's going to look like for you. And yeah, that's for me is, probably the number one sort of thing that we can go for. And it's important as well because there's nothing, more rewarding than retaining staff. And sometimes you do end up losing colleagues. And if it's done right and there's honesty on both sides, someone leaving because they clearly need to take an opportunity that's going to pay them way more than you can. It's not a personal statement on you as an organization or as a manager. It could just be, look, you don't know the challenges that they've got in their personal life. And so that person exiting, you don't want them to go, but you kind of make sure it's done in the right conditions, will be a great advocate and be there almost as a free, person advocating your business. And, they will talk about that, and the attracting new people into your organization can get a little bit easier for that. So honesty is always going to be the criteria for me for attracting and retaining quality of staff.
Brilliant. And then looking at the retention side of things, Andy, what again would you say is the most important factors when you're looking at developing or growing your staff retention rates?
Yeah, it's it's very difficult as a people leader in any size organisation, because the one thing you never really get a handle on is what your Monday morning is going to look like. You walk in with a set of plans, and someone wants to resign, someone's not happy, someone wants a promotion. So you have to sort of take that as part of the role. But for me, I've always felt that being visible and sharing what's happening with an organisation, sometimes it's tough. Sometimes it's not what people want to hear, and if there's a challenging environment in the market, that can have an impact on big decisions. It could have an impact on things just being parked or protracted out. And if you've got a colleague and they are almost on the cusp of being able to move into a new role or get some expanded opportunities, and then you've almost agreed that, and then it has to change, that's difficult, because you're talking about the trust element can be broken down. But it's hugely important you're able to sit down and explain why, and it can have a knock-on effect. And sometimes you have to be honest and say, right, okay, that person we're going to lose them, and we don't want to, but we can't contain their ambitions with where we are. And so retaining staff is obviously, you want to retain your staff. You also want to retain your best staff. It's like football manager, does dread the transfer window today, but at the same time, that there is going to be an opportunity for someone else to come in and join that team and develop and possibly take you in a different direction with new ideas. And so it's one of those things. It's a headache, but it can work out well for both parties as well. So again, it's just being absolutely as honest as you possibly can.
Brilliant. No, I think that was really insightful, Andy, in terms of learning the kind of honesty, clarity, and removing uncertainty can support both on attracting and retaining from that front. And I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to comment on the attraction retention side, Andy, or if you've got any questions for us on our side. Obviously, we play a part in that as well, in terms of attracting and retaining for our clients as well on that side.
Yeah, I think it's obviously we've worked together, Zenopa and myself, for a number of years, and I think it's always key from a recruitment point of view that we have recruiters that understand not only the business that they're helping us with, but understand a little bit about let's say me as a hiring manager, because you will know the kind of candidates that possibly we'll be looking for, the cultural fit that we talked about, the candidate ideally being someone who is probably a little bit more flexible and not necessarily coming in to do a like-for-like role, from their previous organisation. You want them to feel challenged and have that capacity of 20-25% to develop new skills. And so it's hugely important that not only when we sit down with you as a recruiter and say, well, okay, this is the role that we would like to start looking for, actually you've kind of invested a lot of time in understanding who we are as a business. And that's something that as a recruiter and partner in the life sciences arena, and those have been absolutely fantastic working with me over the last best part of 25 years, and certainly in the last 10 years recruiting as well.
Brilliant. And that's all the questions from my side, Andy. So just before I open up to the floor, Andy, have you got any questions for me at all on anything that we've discussed? Anything you'd like to understand from our side at all?
Yeah, so I suppose it is just from a recruiter, from a different perspective. What's the sort of challenges you've seen over the last few years, and the changes that's happened supporting both candidates and organisations?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think with this, it's quite not conflicting, but sometimes it is the case of marrying up candidates and clients sometimes want different things. So I think from a candidate perspective, and I think COVID probably didn't help this, we've seen a lot of candidates seeking more flexibility in terms of hybrid working from home, predominantly looking at sort of a 2 days office, 3 day home split. Another thing candidates are prioritising, and we're finding firstly that they are having quite a strong position in the market, and those with aligned skill sets we're seeing having strong demands in terms of package and development. Another thing, culture. We're finding this is becoming more important for candidates when choosing prospective employers. They're looking for non-micromanagement, autonomy, the opportunity to work cross-functionally, and I think that's fitting into having that collaborative environment around them. And one thing more recently, from a candidate perspective, the majority of the reasons why we're finding candidates are looking is due to a lack of personal progression within a business. For example, career progression presented that it's not there, or hitting a ceiling in a small team. So they're the kind of challenges we're finding from a candidate front. Now, the opposite of that from a client front, we're seeing that clients are quite keen to get candidates back in the office to support and grow that collaborative and supporting environment. So this is a bit of a marrying up exercise and a balancing act. Again, one thing we're seeing is that we are seeing clients move their interview processes quicker, and equally those that are delaying processes, we're finding that they are seeming to lose out on strong talent in the market where other clients are moving faster. And equally, one of the things we're looking at doing at the moment, Andy, we're partnering, working really closely with our clients to make sure that their appeal is above others. So we've started looking at sort of creating candidate packs with clients to share with candidates, and that's kind of highlighting positive benefits of joining that specific organisation. Again, culture very important for that, testimonials and bits like that. Does that kind of support on that front, Andy, in terms of a couple of challenges and trends we're finding?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I know there's a couple of questions come in as well, and it's the world has changed a lot since I initially started my career here, and obviously the impact for yourselves as well in terms of the recruitment side of things, and what the expectations are. So, and it's quite insightful actually about the sort of home working versus being brought back into an office. There's a lot of challenges either way around that. I mean, for me, my personal preference, I was always in the office and never really kind of did the home working part of it. But that was just because I was in the lockdowns. I was actually going in to open up a warehouse anyway, so I never got into that routine, and I don't think I ever wanted to, if that makes sense. So, but it would be an advantage for some people to be working from home and not wanting to be in an office environment. So, yeah, pluses and minuses around that for sure.
Absolutely. And now passing on to Eve. Eve, are there any questions from the panel at all for either Andy or myself to answer?
Yes, there's been a few come through. We'll start off with this one. How do you see the role of sales representatives evolving in response to changing customer expectations and the rise of digital engagement?
Yeah, obviously a lot of it has moved to virtual platforms. Prior to the pandemic, it was always a challenge really to get healthcare professionals to commit to a virtual call, and so telesales was largely sort of few and far between. But actually, that's changed a lot. That's obviously got huge benefits because from a cost-effective point of view, when we were back out in our cars pre-pandemic, you'd probably go to 1 or 2 hostels in a day. By the time you did the journey there and navigated around, you were quite limited of what you could actually do geographically. Whereas geographical borders are obsolete, in the virtual world. But it also then adds a little bit of a different challenge, because when I think of my days of from a promotional side, if you walked in and you had an appointment with someone in a clinic and you were seeing the consultant, but actually you might end up having a secondary discussion with one of the supporting nurses or healthcare professional that was advised to have a chat with from that initial discussion. So you'd have like 3 or 4 interactions that possibly weren't, initially kind of what you were going to be doing. And I'm not too sure how that works at the moment with like a Teams call, if they would invite other people in. So I think there's a lot of good things that's changed on the back of that, and possibly some things that have changed and need almost like a fresh approach, really. So, but there's always going to be a need for representation, whether it be at promotional level, whether it be at an educational level, whether it be supporting the whole quality and supply chain aspects. So the role has adapted, but still very much needed.
Great, thanks. Another one is, as COVID highlighted vulnerabilities in global pharma supply chains, do you think there might be a shift in greater localization of manufacturing to increase resilience and reduce dependency on imports from countries like India and China?
Oh, that's a great question. I know we're running out of time, but yes, I think the first bit is it highlighted quite a lot of opportunities for manufacturing where lines are being switched. So we were, I personally was able to support patients by bringing in supply from different regions around the world, and licensed medicines that was. And we were seeing quite a lot of that increase on the back of the pandemic and the continuation for a good few years afterwards. There's not just COVID, by the way, that's impacted on demands as well. There is just think of Ozempic, for example, that just went bonkers in terms of manufacturing demand, and they were all this desperately trying to keep up with that. Meant that there were supply issues around that, so there was positive demand challenges. I would be delighted if it meant that we could get more localized manufacturing. Again, it comes back to that levy. If we can put more money into the UK innovation, that would be great. But we shouldn't see, the reliance on importing manufacturing countries. It's sort of the question was asked about sort of India and China. There's a lot of merit for that. That's where a lot of the cost-effective medicines being manufactured and brought in that we possibly wouldn't be able to manufacture at the same level of manufacturing costs, let's say. So there is. It's a global economy, and medicines are going to come in from all around the world. But it would be good to start seeing probably more manufacturing as well in the UK. Certainly, when I think of where the innovation is going to come from, I think of like gene therapy. That's kind of like the big exciting opportunities. Does a cell that's been extracted out of a patient need to go somewhere in Europe or the other side of the world when it could go to a lab in the UK? So those kind of things are exciting. So we shouldn't just look at physical compounding of medicines as something that is the only innovation in a lab arena.
Perfect, thank you. I know we're running out of time. There's 2 individuals who are specifically about their careers and where they can go and open positions at the moment. Marcus, would you like to dive into that now, or would you rather have one-to-one consultations with them at a later date?
Yeah, I think I'm more than happy to have a one-to-one to discuss a bit more about their background. So what we'll do after this, I know Eve will post on the website more around this for those that have missed certain elements, and as well, if you wanted to head over to my LinkedIn and drop me a message, it'd be great to arrange some time at some point next week to run through this and how both myself and the agencies and OPA can support.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Andy and Marcus, for the webinar today.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Cheers, Andy. Really good to understand from your side your key points and experiences. I think that was really useful. And like we say, we'll be sharing this across to yourself, and really great. Have a nice weekend, Andy. Thanks for that.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye bye.